Hello and welcome to the Long Shot Podcast. I'm your host, Davis Reed, and I'm here by myself because my co-host abandoned me, which is very selfish of him, but he's trying to win a championship, and apparently that's more important than a podcast. If you're surprised to hear my voice, it's because we lied to you. It wasn't intentional. We said we were going Zero Dark 55, but honestly, that's really just for number 55. I have no excuse. This is my day job. So if I'm not podcasting with you guys, I'm not really doing anything. And as nice as a vacation sounded, the Miami Heat looked pretty good. And so it felt wrong to be quiet and not talk about it. So here's the plan. I'm going to keep the podcast rolling. Every week, touch in. I got some people I want to bring on. I got some people I want to talk to. I also just want to talk Heat basketball. We can just do some playoff check-ins. Our guy, Duncan, will come when he can, time permitting, but understand that he's locked in on trying to win a championship. So let's be patient on that front. If that makes you disappointed and you're like, dude, I just listened to this podcast because of the NBA player, I actually get that. I really do. And so sayonara, we'll see you in July, maybe after a championship. If you're like, awesome, great, Davis, I get to hear you talk now for 30 minutes every week. Thank you. That means a lot. I really appreciate it. Look, I'm fired up. I think here's what I want to do today. I want to recap games 1 and 2. I have some thoughts. And then I want to bring on 2 very special guests, and we'll get to some general playoff talk. Let's start with a story. And if you're already like, okay, dude, I don't tune into this podcast to get Davis stories. Well, I'm sorry. I want to start with a story because I was supposed to be down in Miami for games 1 and 2. But husband duty called. I was down there last week. We interviewed Moritz Wagner for the second time. And I was like, awesome, I'm going to stay here for another whole week, get a little Miami sunshine, and then go to games 1 and 2 of the NBA playoffs. How awesome is that? Well, then I get a text from my wife that she fractured her elbow. And so it felt wrong to stay in Miami. Here's what happened. If you listen to this podcast a lot, you know about my dog, Yahtzee. Duncan and I argue about whether it's the responsibility of a child. It's not. I don't actually think that it is, but it's a lot of responsibility. And so sometimes it's like, dog, I don't really want to deal with you. You're bringing a lot of energy right now. I can't match it. So go in the backyard, run around, get it out. Here's the issue. We don't have a fenced-in backyard. So what we do is we tie her up on a 50-foot leash to the back door in the backyard. That way she can run around the backyard, but she can't run away because I don't think she loves us that much. I think she would run away, and we're not going to let her do that. So my wife's tying her up to the back door, which we do, with her 50-foot leash. Here's the issue, though. As she's tying her up, Yahtzee sees a rabbit, and she's in full rabbit phase right now. She really wants to catch a rabbit, and she's not athletic enough to do it, but she's not going to stop trying, and that's something we instilled in her, to have some heart, to have some grit, to try to overcome the obstacles. And isn't that what we stand for here at the Long Shot? So honestly, I can't even really be that mad at her. She was set on trying to catch a rabbit. So she takes off around the corner. My wife is standing in the doorway in the backyard, and she has the thought of, oh, if she gets too far, this door is going to slam on me. Before she even finishes the thought, the dog is too far. The door slams on her, knocks her down. She lands on her elbow on some concrete. Yeah, that doesn't sound very pleasant. She fractures her elbow. It's tragic. I'm in Miami. I'm far away. She's fine. She's tough. In fact, she didn't even really tell me how bad it was. She was like, God, my elbow just kind of hurts. But then it was like, okay, this is really bad. I think I need to go to the emergency room. And while she's telling me that, she's like, what are you doing? Why? My responses were a little slow. Maybe, I don't really know, but it prompted her to ask what I was doing. The truth is, I was at the Justin Bieber concert for the second time in a week. I went in Orlando with Mo and in Miami with Duncan. That's a Monday, Wednesday, back-to-back, 2 Justin Bieber concerts in 72 hours. I didn't really know how to tell her that. It's like, hey, you're on your way to the emergency room. I'm in Miami at Justin Bieber for the second time. And in that moment, I had a little clarity of okay, maybe I should go home and help take care of my wife. So I did. I skipped the first 2 playoff games so I could be in Michigan and take care of my wife. And that's something that I say with pride because it was the right thing to do. I also think it was the right thing to do, by the way, because games 1 and 2 have been awesome. And if I were in Miami, it may have changed the vibes a little bit. My game 1 was just awesome. the Heat just look locked in. I know that this team was like, oh, they're built for the playoffs. In the offseason when PJ came, when Kyle came, it was like, wow, this team is built for a playoff run. There was actually some concern about what they were going to look like in the regular season. Are they too old? PJ's getting up there. Kyle's getting up there. Jimmy's getting up there. There were some concerns about the lack of depth. Actually turned out to be the exact opposite issue. The Heat were awesome this year. Best team in the East, largely because of that depth. Guys like Max, Gabe, Caleb, Omer, Dwayne Dedman, our guy. Although our guy doesn't really fit in that category anymore because he got paid. But we're awesome all year. Got the Heat the 1 seed. But still in game 1, it was like, oh, shit, maybe this team is built for the playoffs. Because they just looked, there was just like a tenacity, a ferociousness. They looked locked in. It was like little stuff, right? Like helping guys up off the floor, bench celebrations, Jimmy yelling his face off. I mean, that stuff matters. Like they just looked intense. And I know there was some talk about like, oh, it was a schedule loss for the Heat or for the Hawks. They had to play 3 games and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, be better. They're a 9 seed. Like, I'm not buying that excuse. You weren't even supposed to be in the playoffs. How can you argue about fatigue when you're a 9? Like, yeah, the Heat were the 1 seed. They got to spend a week chilling, kicking their feet up, going to the Bahamas. That's the benefit of being the best team in the regular season. So I'm not buying that excuse. Also, by the way, these guys play every other day and back-to-back games all season. It's not like this is new. I know it's a playoff intensity, so maybe the games are a little bit tougher. I get that. But I'm not buying the fatigue excuse. Game 1, Heat blow them out for a variety of reasons. One, that tenacity I was talking about. They just looked nasty, like in a good way. 2, it was the Duncan Robinson game. I mean, that guy just exploded. 8 for 9 from 3. He just looked confident. He looked locked in. He had that look. Like LeBron Game 6 Boston, like I'm going to rip your heart out look. It wasn't that, but it was in that genre. Like he just looked confident. He looked like he was throwing it in the ocean. Looked like he was having fun. And go back and look at the difficulty of those shots. It's one thing when it's Maxi Kleba hitting like target practice threes in the corner because Gobert can't get 2 feet outside the lane. And that's not even really a shot at Gobert. It's just like the scheme in Utah. Whatever. Anyway, that's one thing. It's another when Duncan's just flying around the arc, catching handoffs, getting and ones, throwing shit off balance. He just couldn't miss. And it was awesome. 9 of 10 from the field, 8 of 9 from 3, 27 points. He was amazing. And then the Heat defense. It's well documented. If you're a Heat fan, you've probably heard a lot about this. If you're not a Heat fan, you're probably like, I've heard enough. But it's true. The Bam's just amazing. Imagine you're Trey. I mean, Trey was in prison all of game 1. Maybe the worst game of his career. 1 for 12 from the field, 8 points. You can't find a game that's even close to that bad for him because he's a stud until like a year and a half ago, or you have to go back like a year and a half. He's in prison all day because imagine you're like, oh, Kyle Lowry's guarding me. He's a pretty good defender. All right, let's come get a screen. Oh, shit, now it's Bam. Okay, let's come get a screen. Oh, God, now it's PJ. Okay, oh, shit, now it's Jimmy. It's like, what do you do? By the way, Max Strus, amazing defensively, too, in that first game. He's been good in both games, actually. But Trey's in prison. He's smothered. Pick and roll defense was amazing. And again, it was just like intentional stuff from the Heat. They just looked like they were locked in. Caught Atlanta off guard. Maybe there was a little fatigue, whatever. Anyway, game 1's a blowout. So then game 2, you imagine they're going to bring a better effort. Right after the game, they're talking about fatigue. After the game, they're talking about the Heat are bullies. So it's like, okay, they're going to bring it in game 2, and they did. Game 2 was awesome. By the way, Duncan kind of predicted how this series was going to go unintentionally last week before we even knew that the Heat were playing the Hawks. He was like, you just can't tell in a series how things are going to differ in a game. Let's say game 1 you hit 18 threes, which they did. You shut down their star guard, which they did. You can't count on doing that the next game in the same way, right? Like you can't rely on hitting a bunch of shots again. You can't rely on giving the guy the same looks because guys are just too good, and especially Trey. It's like these guys are going to figure out how to be effective. And Trey did. He was better. I mean, he had 25, 7, and 6, I think. Career high 10 turnovers though, because the Heat again, like they've first 2 games they've won that chess match. They figured out how to slow down Trey. The Hawks almost got saved by Bogdan. He had like a Duncan Robinson-esque fourth quarter where he was just throwing shit up and it was going in. It didn't matter what it was. But game 2 was the Jimmy Butler game. If game one was the Duncan Robinson / defense on Trey game two was the Jimmy game. He was awesome. 45, but it wasn't even really like, it was the last 5 minutes. It's like, the Heat have had, I think, some issues this year with fourth quarter scoring, and they went through one of those spells from like the 9 to 6 minute mark. They were up 16 with like 9 minutes to go. I think it was 94-78. And then in 3 minutes, Bogdanovich goes berserk, and all of a sudden it's 94-90. Hawks went on a 12-0 run. I think that's right, 94-90. And all of a sudden you're thinking, wait, the Heat there's no way they lose this game, right? Are they going to lose this game? And then Gabe Vincent. By the way, moment of silence for Gabe Vincent. Maybe moment of silence is the wrong terminology because that makes it feel like a sad thing. Maybe like moment of applause for Gabe Vincent. He was amazing in game two. I don't think the Heat win that game without Gabe Vincent. In the first quarter, he provides this spark off the bench. He's hitting tough shots. Defense on Trey all game was incredible. He's just in his stuff. Had that drive where Trey tried to take him to the basket, and Gabe was just like, give me that. I want that. That ball, that's mine. Just took it from him. He was awesome. And so in this stretch, all of a sudden it's 94-90. And who hits a shot? Gabe Vincent in the corner. Hits a tough, huge corner three. Makes it 97-90. And all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, we've got a little breathing room. Bogdan comes down, hits another shot. Oh my God, this is the Bogdan game the Heat are going to lose. And then just Jimmy Butler takeover. I want to read the play-by-play actually after that shot. So Gabe hits a huge shot, makes it 97-90. Bogdan comes down, hits another three, and you're just like, what's going on? Now all of a sudden it's 97-93. And then here's what happens. Kyle gets an and one. Beautiful. And then it goes Jimmy steal dunk. Jimmy drive, dish to Bam for a dunk. Jimmy dunk, Jimmy three, Jimmy layup, game over. Jimmy is so good in these physical games. He's 7th in the NBA in drawing fouls, but the only guard ahead of him is Luka. I think he's the best in the NBA at getting contact. And Duncan's talked about this a little bit, but it's different than like a James Harden who just sort of will bait you into hitting him, right? He'll like throw the ball in front of you, and so you sort of get caught with his arm. Jimmy just lunges, like he'll just throw his body at you. He's not afraid at all of the contact. In fact, he thrives on the contact. And he's just, in a game like game two, where it's physical, it's choppy, it's a little ugly. It's like Jimmy just, I don't know what it is. There's something about, he just thrives in those games. And he was awesome. There's also, when he's hitting threes, I think he was 4 for 7 from three. When he's hitting threes, he's a little LeBron-ish. And I'm not really comparing him to LeBron, although he did have the 45 in a playoff game, which I think only LeBron and D-Wade have done in Heat history. Remember those, like when LeBron's shooting like 8 threes a game, by the way. He shot more threes this year per game than Duncan, fun fact. But older LeBron, or younger LeBron, I guess I should say, when he was hitting threes, it was like, I mean, what are you supposed to do? Nobody can stay in front of him. So usually you just let him shoot. But then if he starts hitting threes, it's like, what do I do? Help. There was a little of that with Jimmy. It was like, we knew he could get to the rim when he wanted. He was getting to the line when he wanted. He's hitting those mid-range little turnarounds, which he's so good at. And then when he's hitting threes, you can just imagine as an Atlanta fan being like, okay, I guess this game's over. Like, what are you supposed to do? There was a little bit of that. He hit that huge three. I was going through the play-by-play. He hits that huge three in the fourth quarter, the like fade away. And then at that point, it's just like, okay, this is the Jimmy Butler game. And look, here's the thing about the Heat. I wish our guy played a little bit more in game two. 7 minutes, 0 shots after his first game explosion was a little disappointing. I'm not going to hide my bias here. Of course, I think he could have been out there. It feels like we talk a lot about his gravity and how valuable his gravity is, even if he's not hitting shots. Feels like gravity would be at an all-time high after you have 27 and go 8 for 9. So it feels like, maybe we bring him in, run some sets, use some of that gravity to our advantage. I'm also not going to act like I'm an NBA coach, though, and I'm not going to act like I know more than Spo. But this is the benefit of the Heat, right? It's like they can do it by committee. They have so many guys. I mean, Victor Oladipo had 40 the last game of the season against Orlando, and he hasn't touched the floor in the playoffs. It's like this is... Again, it's why they were the 1 seed in the regular season. They got like 12 guys who can win you a game or can really impact winning a game. So game two, it was Caleb. Caleb comes into the first half, gives some defensive, boost. Guy's been awesome all year. Spo likes it. Spo sees something he sees. It works. They win. It's hard to complain when you win. So the Heat are up 2-0. They're rolling. They look awesome. And look, I understand, again, I'm biased here. I really think these guys could do it. I really do. I don't want to overreact. It's 2 games. The Hawks, by the way, could easily go win 2 in Atlanta, and all of a sudden it's a series. I don't think that's going to happen. The Heat have looked like the far better team. But my point is, I think the Heat are really good. I think they're really good. And so I think, unfortunately, you might be stuck with just me for a little while, because hopefully our guy is continuing his playoff run.